Hello everyone, sorry for the late video. I recorded a video that was sort of just my general thoughts on things to think about when going into Worlds, and then hated it. So I'm doing this instead. So I'm going to try and incorporate some of those points into sort of two quick replay reviews I want to do. And I want to give a huge shout out to Pheonix+1 and also to DoomRat, who sent me a bunch of replays yesterday when I asked for them. So I really appreciate that. Thank you both. And if you do ever want me to look at replays, I love going over them, and so feel free to send them my way. In terms of why I'm doing replay reviews for Worlds and why I was thinking about doing a general video, one, I haven't decided on my decks yet, and also I'm not building my decks by myself this year for Worlds, so I don't feel like I can talk too openly about exactly what I'm thinking about playing right now. But what I can talk about is the other stuff I think I'm trying to think about, which is like how to actually be happy with my play and how to make the right plays at the right time. And so the big thing, there's sort of like three big things I'm thinking about. One is like entirely in deck selection and Worlds prep, which is like when I pick my runner deck and when I pick my corp deck, how are they going to be, what's my game plan going to be against all of the different decks that I think can be out there. I think this is a really important exercise, both for helping you choose a deck, but also just for helping you refine cards inside the deck as well. So like the very good players are saying, oh, here's, you know, the 2, 3, 4 different decks I want to run. But I think you can also say, here is the deck I want to run. And then saying, oh, what are the matchups out there that I could be up against? And then how do I tune the slots inside that to make those matchups good? Or can I not, you know, sometimes even better, can I not tune deck slots because I already have them well optimized for one matchup? And how can I use these cards maybe in a slightly different way in a different matchup? And then the second sort of question is always, when I actually sit down at the table and am against a specific corp, what is my game plan for this matchup? And then sort of in the third part is sort of all of the tactical decision making in the game. And there's so many different things here in terms of where are the agendas, where should I be applying pressure? And, you know, that sounds like a runner thing, but I actually think that's actually almost more true for the corp. And I think Pheonix+1 sent two great replays that show like I can talk about strategic level, high level things, and then also I think some tactical levels things as well. All right, sorry, just fixing the screen a little bit because it felt a little too zoomed in, so we couldn't see one important piece of information. So in this first game as Pheonix+1, we are playing a 40 card max against a 45 card Ag Infusion. So Ag Infusion is always been an ID that like no one plays all year and then it pops up at Worlds a lot. So this is like an example of a list that like you should probably have some idea of how to play against. And I think Pheonix+1 does a pretty reasonable job of playing against it here. The ID ability of Ag Infusion is really quite good. Once they get one piece of expensive, nasty to face check ice rezzed, they can just, you know, trash a piece of unrezzed ice to make you bounce into that ice. So you have to whenever you make runs, you have to be ready to hit whatever their nastiest res ice is. However, the trade-off, right, is that they don't have a ton of econ. They're spending clicks and cards to make you use their ID ability. So there are ways for you to find windows for opening pressure. One of the things that's interesting about Ag Infusion is it's a very player-dependent list. Some players will try and play it to build up an inevitable server. They'll have like a Bio Vault or probably now Anoetic Void, and they'll just build up an inevitable, like literally, even if you just ran my remote for 4 clicks straight, you can't get in. And other players will try and play it more rushy. And so you have to be able to account for both. I think generally the rushy strategy is going to be a little bit stronger, but also be a little bit more high roll, low roll for the deck overall. So Pheonix+1 on their strategic level, they actually, as we'll see, have a lot of really good tools for this matchup specifically. And I think their tools are really designed to try and hit precision design primarily. And then they're going to be repurposed in a slightly different way to hit Ag Infusion. And I think there's some really smart anti-precision design tech in here that also gets used pretty well here. So Pheonix+1's first decision is, do they keep or do they mulligan? And this is a pretty slow hand, all things considered, right? It's got 2 drip cards, daily casts, and data folding, 1 breaker, an overclock, which will be nice for pressuring the remote once there's some breakers in the heap, and I've had worse, which is draw. This hand's, I think, actually a pretty reasonable keep against Ag Infusion. Against something like a Precision Design, I think it's much more questionable because you're basically conceding the first 2-3 turns. Like, you won't be able to challenge a Rashida, most likely, on the first turn against a Precision Design here. So with that in mind, we're going to talk through sort of how it goes, but basically Ag Infusion starts in exactly the way you would want to start as the runner you're hoping they start with this hand. Instead of trying to shove something in a remote very early, they are playing hedge fund and icing their centrals. And so because we have no run economy, we're very happy to draw here. I think there's a good case to make that you play the I've had worse, which is what Pheonix+1 does. You click for a credit, you gamble. I have a slight preference probably for the casts over the data folding, because while, yeah, in theory, data folding, like, it's 1 credit for longer forever, a credit, 2 credits next turn is better than 1 extra credit in like 8 billion turns or something, right? So data folding is going to take 8 turns to make the same value the daily cast is in 4. And I probably care more about what the board state looks like in 4 turns than I do in 8 turns. 4 turns I'll have more ability to pivot the game state in the way I want. But that's a very small thing, and I even could be wrong about that. This to me is a great turn where I just go draw, install, install, install. And that is exactly what Pheonix+1 does. So, like, right, the game plan here, we haven't milled any of our breakers except the paperclip. So we're still sort of setting up and trying to wait for Ag Infusion to present us threats, or for us to find something like Bagat and Hippo, which are both great tools for putting pressure on a central server. And that's one of the things you want to do against Ag Infusion is, oh, they want to make you just care about the remote, and then they'll put an Anansi on archives and just say, neener, neener, I'm going to bump you to archives every time. But if you can tax out their centrals, blow up their ice on centrals, you can end up in a very nice spot. And so getting the drip going is very handy for that. And then I think actually just taking credits here is pretty reasonable. You actually do want basically all of these cards that are in your hand currently. So we sort of just see stuff happening. Now here, I actually see one of the first plays that I sort of disagree with here. To me, when Pheonix+1 plays this Deuces Wild, this is a great time to actually use the explosive piece of ice and make a run, because we have no information about this board state, but knowing what ice is where is huge for this matchup, right? What happens is, oh, let's say I expose this R&D ice, and it's like a Kakugo. I would love to make the corpse spend some of their 12 credits so they go down to 8. That makes a huge difference in terms of, oh, let me try and shrink this up just, oh no, actually I can't. Sorry, you can't see that this is the Deuces Wild there, but right, if you can see that this is if this becomes, you reveal this as an Anansi, that's great. Now you know where one of the Anansis is, and you just go and run archives. If this is like a Kakugo, you make them res the Kakugo, and then you can either hippo it or bounce off of it. Both of them I think are pretty reasonable choices. I would probably bounce off of it in this state, because it's not, you don't have like a Stargate down where the pressure becomes valuable. And if you do have a Stargate in the list, which I don't know Pheonix+1's lists, but I would assume you would, then not encouraging them to overinvest in R&D can be nice. And so basically by just taking 2 cards and 3 credits, you've sort of spent a card slot and an influence to not do anything you couldn't just do by taking basic actions. And we end up not drawing into anything great, which is a little bit of post hoc analysis for sure. And it actually ends up Pheonix+1 doing a very, very early rebirth, and I'm not a huge fan of this, right? One of the ways that Ag Fusion wins, right, is by dragging you through a server 1 over and over again, which means that they're going to try and gear check you with different breakers, and also they're going to try and use an economic lead. And that economic lead, one of the ways that you generate value as Anarch is by being max, right? Max is drawing you a card every turn and putting 2 cards in the heap. We don't have any of our non-paperclip breakers in the heap yet, and we probably do want those in the heap. As we'll just find out, there's actually Ngolo in this list, but you actually are still pretty okay with it when you have 2 labor rights in the hand to just do an early labor rights to get the Ngolos back in and try and draw them. Now, with the Begot down, there is actually some immediate value into using Omar on HQ, and that you get to access a card and mill a card off of the top of R&D, which is very helpful. And then we also snipe the agenda, which, you know, if you got good hands, you can basically ignore anything I say. And so the Corp is forced to, and they actually double ice archives right away, which is fantastic. That means they're investing, that means they're not investing ice on server 1, and we have lots of room to kind of apply pressure. This run I'm not that big of a fan of because there's no pressure being presented to us, and we don't have the tools to handle 2 out of the 3 scary ice. So both the DNA tracker and an Anansi are bad here. And, you know, the Corp has money to res both. Now, admittedly, it's not the end of the world here. Now, we do lose 2 labor rights, but I guess one of the advantages to rebirthing early is that we will draw the last one. We don't have to worry that much about it being milled, but we are committing to spending a lot of clicks to draw for the rest of this game. At 3 credits, we can go through and take the full access. There's maybe an Ike could be annoying for us here, but it likely won't be. And so, yeah, then you just draw back up so that you can stay in the economic game. We have a large economic lead, so now we just need to stay in control of the board state. The frustrating thing, of course, is we can't really run server 1 here because we'll just get booped into the Anansi by Ag Infusion. So we got to do other stuff. So we found the MK. That's great. We found it in Ngolo. And with this, you actually probably could Ngolo overclock on server 1. The thing that would hurt is when they res the outer ice, you break it with Ngolo, then you kind of have to jack out. But if they do that, you probably didn't end up paying that much because Ngolo is fairly efficient against what's out there, and you have an opportunity to hippo something there. Or if they bounce you into the Anansi, you get to hippo it right away. So you have some way of pressuring this regolith mining license and keeping the Corp pretty low on credits. But the other option, I think that's sort of my let's tactically deny the Corp money, but it's not the only option here. The other option, of course, is, next turn, I can just slam the Ngolo, kill the Anansi, and go back to pressuring HQ with Begot. And I think, for me going on that tangent about the other line, in many ways it makes, I think Pheonix+1's line makes more sense here. It's a pretty guaranteed line. Though I think, no, this is fine. And when the Corp basically takes a whole turn just to credit back up, then this sort of play looks quite nice. And yeah, overclocking, getting the Anansi for a net of 1 real credit, I think. 2 credits from the credit pool. It's pretty darn solid. We see a Kakugo, and I think we make the right decision just to bounce on this. Having access to the Spoon and the Hippo is going to be very important in this matchup because we can start tearing down Confusion's defenses. So we just keep drawing. And I do like actually holding back this sure gamble. Cards in hand are going to be more important here. We've got lots of econ. Now this to me looks like a push in server 1. And so I would definitely be tempted to go for it here. Doing something like gamble, run server 1, or even you're probably going to get some ice here. But this spooned on HQ also makes some sense. And when you rip the oboe, like, again, if you have good hands, you don't need any piece of advice. The reason I sort of liked challenging this remote is you can hit it, and then they can't really boop you into anywhere that's going to be scary. Because everything's unread, so you'll bypass the first piece of ice, and then you can decide to jack out or look at your economic situation and keep going with the Ngolo. Now, it turns out Server 1 wasn't an agenda, but this being like La Costa and Nisei Mark II would be pretty reasonable, or an Off-World Office or a Cyberdeck Sandbox, pick your powerful 4-2 of choice. And then there's a lot of drawing that's happening, and then HQ gets iced back up. So the nice thing about doing all this targeted destruction on HQ, of course, is that you get, you're forcing them to invest ice on HQ, not Server 1. So long term is fairly vulnerable. Just doing good stuff. Yeah, so this, the downside not being max is that we're committing to a lot of draw, and we basically used Omar once. Now, admittedly, we used it once, Stolen Agenda, and got 2 ice installed, so it's a pretty powerful ID swap. In exchange, we've had to draw, like, 6, 7, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Maybe a few more even. So it's, half dozen. It's a little bit ambiguous to me. I would probably say, it would have probably been better to be max for an extra turn or two, but maybe being on Ngolo rather than Black Orchestra changes that calculus a little bit. So they use DRM and then install a card in Server 1 and advance it once. Now they showed us a Nisei Mark II, and they had something that's around. So this is either a protecting upgrade or a La Costa grid. But I think we're in a decent spot to go and challenge this, and Pheonix+1 agrees. And I actually think quite cleverly here, or, in a reasonable line, because they're dripping 3 per turn, because they have 2 open MU, they're just going to click through the Bran, saying, oh, I can break this if you res it, so basically you have to boot me to keep me out. And then it turns out it's an NGO, and then it's a DNA tracker. And I actually think resing this DNA tracker for Melkor's Folly was a bit of a mistake. If your opponent's committing to clicking through Brands, you can just res the DNA tracker, and unless this is an Anoetic Void, which we're going to find out it's actually a La Costa, and there's no real reason for Pheonix+1 to trash it here. If they do, they're potentially in some economic trouble next turn. I guess the argument for trashing it would be that, well, now you don't have to run an unadvanced card in Server 1, and you have enough econ. So actually, maybe that was... Initially, I thought that not trashing this La Costa is correct, but actually I think in retrospect it probably is correct. You'll still start next turn on 8 credits. You can gamble and then like spoon Server 1 if they go install again. And also Melkor's Folly is only on 4 credits, so you've got lots of options. But as Melkor's Folly, you want to, if the runner's clicking through Brand, you actually want to have an unresed ice after it so you can boop them away. And you spent 8 to res DNA tracker that got broken for 5. It's just not a great, and the runner is already out econing you. So it's a little bit of a rough trade here. We see double installs in Server 1. Spending 4 and then 5 to draw 2 cards seems pretty solid here. Then we're getting booped into the Bran, and then just clicking so that you don't get to install some ice, because installing an ice behind Bran, that's actually a really cute Bran synergy, that you can use it to install an ice behind it and then boop them away. And you can do it from Archive. So Bran actually sounds like a really nice include in Ag Infusion. I hadn't thought about that before. And then we're just going to keep blowing up the ice on HQ, which I think makes a lot of sense for the game plan we have, because we have this really nice pressure tool. And we've made it very hard for Melkor's Folly to score out of Server 1. We are a little low on credits, But again, we're going to drip back 3 next turn, and then we can do something like install liberated, click it a bunch if an ice lands on HQ. So I believe, oh wow. Oh yeah, Elko's only on 3 credits, so we get to run anyway. We steal the oboe, and we win the game. So, you know, I think Pheonix+1 actually demonstrated some really nice sort of strategic level stuff that you want to do against Ag Infusion, which is basically like you need to keep them spread out and try and pressure their economy, which they don't have a lot of. And then once you draw a pressure tool that helps you on the central, you're in a really good spot. So that there's basically 2 centrals being threatened on this board. And that was enough to kind of take apart the Ag Infusion. I think the Ag Infusion maybe made one mistake. I think resing this DNA tracker ends up costing them the whole game here. But even if they didn't res the DNA tracker and were able to score an agenda that's presumably in server 1, Pheonix+1 is still up, will still be up on game point, having stolen 2 agendas, and Melkor's Folly only being on probably 2 points here. And so that gives, you know, Pheonix+1 a lot of room to exploit a pretty, even with these, you know, even if Melkor's Folly is on 11 credits here instead of 3, there's a lot of room here for Pheonix+1 to sort of keep blowing open the game. So there was a lot of, I think, really, you know, when thinking about this in terms of like those 3 things, I think there were a lot of tactically correct decisions, and then also a really good strategic understanding of what's going on in the game. Oops. Going on to the next game, we see Pheonix+1 playing Outfit against a max deck. And this is a big max deck. It's a 60 card max deck. I'm not going to go and try and litigate big max versus not big max. But right, as Outfit here, most big max decks are predicated on the idea that the average value of the 45th through 60th card is roughly the same or even slightly positive value for you, and that when your 2 corp options that you're planning against are either precision design, so you can, and you have tools to sprint through your deck to try and get breakers, or it's like an Acme where it's going to take an hour to play the game. You've got enough cards to just make near, you know, more value than Acme can generate. So Outfit's going to play much more like the PD matchup, and your job as Outfit, I think, is to make it play like the PD matchup, but you have the hard-hitting news fork so that you can rush agendas out and try and kill them. That said, this hand, real bad. Nothing really that you can do until you draw econ cards, so mulliganing for econ makes a lot of sense here. Unfortunately, you know, this is a pretty rough mulligan. Withdrawing the Hostile, I think you have some really interesting questions. I think scoring the Hostile turn 1 is always one of my favorite plays in any Wayland deck to do, unless you're maybe playing Gagarin, I guess. But then you probably shouldn't have Hostile in your list. The downside of that, right, is that then the 5 cards left in HQ, none of them we really want accessed, and the runner probably will be able to access. There is some concern about hard-hitting news, so it's a relatively safe play in Outfit, and I think a reasonable one. And again, it fits that strategic level game plan of we need to go fast, and Hostile does great for that. And so, while in theory we could land a hard-hitting news here, it's actually a pretty bad hard-hitting news to land. Just because it sets us back way, way more, and the Anarch is sitting on, you know, can spend a turn clearing and then be back to 10 credits faster than we can, significantly faster than we can. And so now just setting up to start scoring makes a ton of sense, right? There's no breakers in the heap. We can start getting ready to score, and it makes a lot of sense to do so. You know, border control is really good for forcing out early scores. And, you know, now it's, oh, you have to be able to install both MK and border control, and then break this trebuchet twice and the border control once to go after this GFI. So, you know, it's a very, very nice rush plan. And, like, the ideal world is you score this, and then you just go again, and you just like you do like hedge fund, install, and you just cook it twice again because the runner doesn't have that many credits. Now you're getting Stargate locked, which absolutely sucks. So you're pretty all in on scoring this GFI quickly. So I actually think here, yeah, and here the GFI gets installed. And the runner's doing it like very carefully, trashing all your ice. And then saying, well, you can't win off of this score, so I have a whole turn to play with. And I think Pheonix+1 does the right thing, is saying, well, basically I have to score, and 17 credits might be enough here. And this hippo kill, actually, this hippo install was very well hidden by the opponent, just to make it so that we don't get to double use the trebuchet. But there was basically no ice ordering there. We would need a third piece of ice to really make it work. But this is where we have the hard-hitting use fork, and this is, you know, quite nice. And I think we even know that there is a high-profile target, one from the top. So it's very important that gets into our hand and not gets stargated. And Pheonix+1 does the appropriate thing, and then plays hard-hitting use. The runner goes down to 2 tags, so now they can't die as long as they have 5 cards in hand, and then goes back to their Stargate plan. No agendas. They reveal too big to fail, a spin doctor, and a trebuchet. We're just going to slowly trash their econ and then protect R&D. I actually wonder if trashing that trebuchet was more important so that you could keep the Stargate lock. And I think that was probably a misplay from the opponent here. Let's see. So just trashing their econ, which I think makes sense given the econ disparity and the fact that we probably need to land another hard-hitting use. And then we install a Roughneck Repair Squad behind a trebuchet. I think Roughneck Repair Squad doesn't actually make really any sense in the Corp deck for exactly this turn here. Runner's recovering. They've got 5 credits, and we do effectively nothing, right? We already had a 7-credit lead. It's opened up by a little bit more now. Like now it's a 14-credit lead. And we've removed a bad pub, but we spent our whole turn doing that, right? This could be an operation, or like if we drew for agendas, drawing for agendas, or drawing for our second hard-hitting news and going like Mausolus Trebuchet agenda can win us the game here, or get us much closer to winning the game. And so what we see is Pheonix+1 sort of spends 3 turns, and they gained 18 credits, removed all of their bad pub, but in the meantime, the runner has installed 2 Rizekis and gone up to 12 credits. And so, like, the idea behind Outfit is typically, oh, you rush. Now the runner is able to threaten R&D again, as soon as they find their next hippo. And there's probably 2 in their list, given that they're playing a 60-card list. I'd be a little surprised if they cut it, or if they didn't find room for the last one. And then we're back to being Stargate locked and probably lose that way, because there's 1 agenda in archives already, so they just need to find any other agenda to win the game. And so spending 3 turns not moving the board state is very, very risky here. However, they run into HQ and hit a snare, and so we end up kind of being okay. Also here, there's 2 Angolas in the bin, so you should definitely put Hordem on R&D so that they can't actually run. And this is sort of like where tactically, like, I think this game for Pheonix+1, and they're going to end up winning, I believe. Yes. But there's sort of a mismatch of the strategy of the deck and some of the cards on the list, and there's also some small tactical things, like when you're playing against Mac, check out the heap. There's no black orchestras in this 60-card list, but there are 2 Angolos both in the bin. and all 3 labor rights. So this Whoredom is probably unbreakable if you put it on R&D, and now you can no longer lose the game. You put, the Mausolus, you maybe even spend, instead of spending 3 whole turn including the Roughneck Repair Squad, you can just advance the Mausolus, and the runner now can't score an agenda. You just draw it off of R&D whenever you draw it, install it in server 4, and you're gold. You've basically built the unkillable server. Now the runner misclicks here, sees the ice and sort of has to go and trash it, and it is what it is. They're also running last click, which is a choice, and a pretty questionable one, especially given that they've already seen a snare. And yeah, we actually see, unless this last card in the heap is a Black Orchestra, there's none in the list, and so we're at a pretty good spot. Hit the snare. They know there's a high-profile target in hand. They're just going for singles on HQ, hoping that there's something there, and then concedes. So, we ended up, Pheonix+1 ends up winning here, but I think sort of, you can see, there's the strategic level thing of including the Roughneck Repair Squad, which basically, right, if we can go back, the first Roughneck Repair Squad was used here. So the board state is the runner's on 5 credits. They've got sort of a pseudo drip for Paladin, and we have a huge economic lead. 1 turn later, they've put down a Rozeki. They've drawn a bunch and cleared all their tags. 1 turn after that, they now have another Rozeki down, have drawn more. They've made some runs, and we're still we've saved ourselves. We've spent 3 turns to make the runner spend 3 extra credits on central runs. It's not clear to me that that's particularly advantageous compared to spending a whole turn drawing to go and force the runner to run on server 4, our scoring remote much faster. And then also there's the evaluating of the board state and recognizing, oh, all of their code gate breakers are gone, so my best line is to install a code gate breaker on R&D, or install a code gate on R&D, install a code gate on server 4, and just make it so they can never actually steal an agenda. But it's not usually intended for Wayland to be a lockout, or this outfit to be a lockout list, but it certainly can function as one, and that's sort of a tactical thing you want to try and get in the habit of recognizing. I probably will not be making, but I think that's sort of it for the content of this video. I don't think I'll be able to make up another one before Worlds. I will definitely be making one after Worlds where I talk a little bit about the decks I chose, how I did, etc., etc. But I also want to say some advice that I'm going to be trying to do and sort of thinking about my goals for Worlds. So I think my actual set of goals for Worlds is not going to be a placement-based goal because I don't think I have a lot of control over where I place directly. What I can do is set goals that are take the highest percentage lines in all of my games is the first goal I want to take. Not missing wins that I have on the board is a low bar goal, but it is an important one to have. If I have a 1 board state, I don't want to throw it away, and that's the biggest thing I want to set as a goal, because that's something I have a lot of control over. But other things I'm going to think about is, did I eat enough? Did I drink enough? Did I sleep enough the nights before? And those are sort of silly goals, but they're also, I think, really going to be important because it's long days of Swiss. So I would encourage you, especially because we have the luxury of playing from home, play in comfy clothes, have some food near you, have some water near you, and I hope if you're playing at Worlds, have a good time. And if we pair up at Worlds, well, hopefully you haven't learned too much from me, and good luck and have fun.